we're going to be covering the Atlanta Hawks with key additions of Tiago Splitter, Jason Richardson, and Tim Hardaway Jr. They also have a major loss in DeMar Carroll. The Atlanta Hawks, one of the elite teams last year in the Eastern Conference. Our preview potentially has them dropping a bit. Justin, when you're looking at the Atlanta Hawks, best team in the East last year, a lot of people could argue, but they've had some slips up in our rankings. Do you think this had more to do with other teams getting better, them getting worse? Where do you stand on these Atlanta Hawks?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't agree that they were the best team in the East. They certainly had the best regular season, but they were swept in the Eastern Conference Finals to a Cavs team that was missing Kevin Love and Kyrie for the bulk of it. That being said, them slipping in the rankings, in my eyes, has a little bit more to do with the loss of DeMar Carroll. I really do think that's going to hurt them because I don't really see an addition that's going to fill his role. And the Hawks last year were so about their chemistry that they had built from the year before. Every single guy knew exactly what he needed to do. If you take one piece out, I'm not sure if it's like a Jenga puzzle where the whole thing could fall apart. Without his shooting, without his defense, because he was the guy that was guarding all the big elite wings in the NBA. He guards the Carmelos, the LeBrons. I just don't see where they replace that. And I mean, their biggest addition was Tiago Splitter, but if you're going to put him on the floor, you're taking one of your two best players off in Al Horford or Paul Millsap. So I think the East got a little bit better, and I think the Hawks slip a little bit.
Absolutely. And also we forget that in last year's playoffs, they did lose Thabo Cephalosha to an unfortunate incident. And depending on his timeline, maybe they hope he can bring up some of that defensive prowess, I suppose. I don't think he's on the same level shooting-wise as Carroll, but he does bring good D. I've heard some rumors that potentially they want to try sliding Millsap down to the 3 to allow Tiago Splitter to start. Maybe a bit of a mistake because where they had the focus on defense at the 3. I think Millsap's going to get burned by a lot of prominent threes. Now, this is a team that, to be honest, last year I wasn't a huge fan of. I understand chemistry is important. They shoot really well. Kyle Korver had a career year. Jeff Teague played really well. The whole team essentially played pretty well. But to me, they were lacking that star. And again, this conversation of, can a team win without a superstar? And I know Al Horford is pretty up there. Paul Millsap's pretty up there. But to me, they still don't have it. So do you think they run on chemistry, or do you think this is a team that is going to be, I don't know, when I look at that front court, again, and I know I keep talking about shot blocking, rim protection, but they're a little bit small. Al Horford and Paul Millsap aren't the biggest of power forwards and centers. Without the weak side defense of DeMar Carroll, I worry that they kind of maybe overachieved last year, and they won't be able to sustain this.
Well, I think the Hawks were one of the best coached teams in the NBA. So right off the bat, you have that. The thing that concerns me with sliding Paul Millsap to the 3 and Horford to the 4 isn't so much about how Millsap's going to perform at the 3. I don't think there's too many threats at small forward that are going to be able to expose him. It's more about what happens moving Al Horford to the 4. He operates at his best as a center. He's one of the best defensive centers in the league, even though he is a smaller 4 center at 6'10". But he's got great length. As a center, he's able to operate out of the high post. He's got range. He can space the floor a little bit. I think if you're going with Splitter at the center, you're going completely away from the identity that they had last year. What works so well with them, with their bigs being able to space the floor, with Teague being able to probe the defense when the spacing was available. I just think the chain effect of removing Carroll, putting in a more traditional center in Tiago Splitter, I just think it's going to hurt them. And even though they're certainly in that second tier in the East, that I think basically everyone 2 through 6 or 7 has a shot at making the Eastern Conference Finals, and the Hawks certainly have that. I just think that there's something missing here. I think Horford can be one of your best players, but It's not that they don't have a star. I just think you need to have you need to have a premier wing player. You need to have somebody else to go with Horford. It's not a one-star league anymore. You see Houston's got James Harden, Dwight Howard. All the best teams are able to, they have someone on the inside. Golden State had Draymond Green, and then they had Curry and Thompson. You have to have guys in the front court and the back court, at least one premier player in each position, if I'm going to take you seriously as a contender.
Absolutely. My fear, when I look at teams, I'm always in GM mode, and I'm always thinking, do you have the ceiling to be able to get to where you want to be? And as my final thought on this, I just think they're a good team that could make it to the finals, like you said. But I kind of think this is eerily reminiscent on a very different level of the Hawks a few years back when they had a fledgling Horford, Josh Smith, Joe Johnson, always in the playoffs, but it wasn't quite enough to make it happen. And when I look at this team, I don't think they're going to be a whole lot better. I mean, they're not the youngest team either. And to a team like that, when you don't have an obvious ceiling to reach, to me, I don't know. I think it's a fun team, very well coached team. They're, considering the talent they have, they're over-exceeding. But I think ultimately this is a team that's going to make the playoffs, maybe make the second round, to be interesting for another 2-3 years until they realize this team as is not going to make sense and not going to be the future.
I don't think I'm as pessimistic as you. I think what they did last year was way more significant than anything they did with the Joe Johnson era of the team. What they did, their offense was fantastic. They were really well coached. It wasn't beating up on lesser teams. They had a lot of really quality wins. I think if you have shown that you have an established system, you have really good players in Paul Millsap and Al Horford and Jeff Teague, you have a great shooter in Kyle Korver. If you win and you show that you can remain competitive and maybe you're a piece away, you become more attractive to free agents. I mean, people talk about Kevin Durant possibly going to Washington. Well, you look at the one gap in Atlanta and it's at small forward. And that's a very complete team that has very good coaching. It's a big market. If he's going to come east, Atlanta to me is a much better fit than Washington. Like, if you put a Kevin Durant in that situation with premier post players, with a pass first point guard, with shooting surrounding him, I think if they're capable of clearing that cap space, they can make a legitimate pitch at him. They made a pitch at Carmelo Anthony. He went with more money, as he's done his entire career. I think Kevin Durant wants to win, and that could potentially be a place that's willing or able to pull him away from OKC. Although I would say, personally, I believe he's staying in OKC, but Atlanta makes a lot of sense to me.
You know what? We agree and disagree on a lot of points, but that was one of the more interesting points I've heard you make in a while. I think that actually fits really, really well. Being able to feed inside, being able to have playmakers such as Teague, don't necessarily need the large bevy of shots like Russell Westbrook does. I like that one. I don't see it happening. I agree with you. I think OKC is going to retain his services, but it could be interesting. Well, guys, we want to know what you guys think about these Atlanta Hawks. Are they the middle of the pack like we've predicted them to be, or do they have possibilities of upsetting some of the bigger guns that we're going to be covering later on? So for myself, Phil Boileau, Justin Rowan, I want to thank you for joining us for another Worst to First moment here on